A black single dad watched a mother cancel her 8-year-old son's birthday cake without telling him the truth. Quietly, he paid for it with the money he had saved for his own mother's therapy, expecting nothing in return. But that small act of kindness led him into a hidden web of fake safety inspections, erased evidence, and a promise he had made after losing his closest friend. Before long, he would discover that saving one child's birthday was only the beginning, and that the next choice he made could save an entire community. Rain streaked the front windows of Bellman's Bakery, blurring the red lights of the train pulling into the Cleveland station across the street. Inside, warm air carried the smell of cinnamon, coffee, and fresh bread. Darius Cole stood near the pickup counter with his 9-year-old daughter, Maya. His work jacket still held a trace of dust from the school basement he had inspected that afternoon. Maya sat on a wooden bench, turning a small silver rescue whistle between her fingers while they waited for her birthday cake. At the register, a woman in a navy coat pushed a receipt across the counter. "I need to cancel the fire truck cake," she said. The young clerk checked the order book. "For Eli Hayes?" The woman nodded without looking up. "But the pickup is tomorrow. We already finished most of it." "I understand." Her phone vibrated. The screen flashed Lakeview Management before she silenced it. A second call came from Franklin Elementary. She rejected that one too. The clerk lowered his voice. "We can return the deposit, but not the decorating fee." "That's fine. It says here tomorrow is his 8th birthday." The woman's hand tightened around the pen. "I wrote down the wrong date." Darius glanced toward the display case. Behind the glass sat a bright red cake shaped like a fire truck, with white ladders piped along the sides. On the door was the gold and blue emblem of Fire Station 14. His expression changed. Maya noticed. "Dad?" He did not answer. The woman signed Lauren Hayes at the bottom of the form. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text preview. "Final notice. Contact the housing office immediately." She turned the screen face down. The clerk slid several bills toward her. Lauren counted them twice, tucked them carefully into an old envelope, and forced a small smile. "Thank you," she said. Before leaving, she looked once toward the cake. For a moment, her face seemed to fold under the weight of something she refused to show. Then the station doors opened outside. Cold rain swept across the sidewalk, and she hurried toward the bus stop. Maya watched her go. The whistle disappeared inside her closed fist. Why would a mom cancel her kid's birthday? Darius kept his eyes on the abandoned cake. The emblem on its door pulled at a memory he had spent 3 years trying not to touch. Behind the counter, the clerk lifted the order slip. "I guess we'll scrape off the name and put it in the discount case." Darius looked at Maya, then at the rain beyond the window. He had bills waiting at home, a therapy payment due next week, and only enough money in his wallet for the cake they had come to collect. Still, he stepped forward. "Don't cancel that order." The young clerk blinked. "Sir?" "The fire truck cake." Darius reached into his wallet and counted the bills one by one. There weren't many. He hesitated for the briefest moment when he saw the folded receipt from his mother's physical therapy appointment tucked behind his driver's license. "That cake is already paid for except for the balance," he said quietly. "I'll cover the rest." The clerk frowned. Are you related to the family?" "No." "Did they ask you to do this?" Darius shook his head. "Then what should I put on the order?" He looked through the rain-streaked window. Lauren was already climbing onto a city bus, her shoulders hunched against the cold. "Don't put my name anywhere." Behind him, Maya slipped off the bench. "But Dad!" That's Grandma's therapy money. He crouched until they were eye level. I know. She needs that appointment. She does. Maya studied his face. She had learned long ago that her father never made promises lightly. When he became quiet like this, he had already made up his mind. So, why? Darius glanced toward the untouched cake. Because somewhere tonight, there's a little boy who doesn't know his birthday, almost disappeared. Maya looked through the glass at the bright red frosting, then back toward the bus that was pulling away. She looked really sad. She did. The clerk cleared his throat. We can finish decorating it by tomorrow morning. I need one more favor. What kind of favor? Can you leave the customer's name exactly as it is? The young man nodded. And don't tell anyone someone else paid. The clerk smiled softly. I can do that. As the receipt printed, Maya reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper covered in careful handwriting. I was making this for my friend, she admitted. But maybe he needs it more. She borrowed a marker from the counter and slowly wrote across a clean card. Every little hero deserves a birthday. She drew a tiny fire helmet beside the words. Darius watched her without saying anything. The silver rescue whistle resting against her coat zipper caught the warm bakery lights for just a second. His eyes lingered on it. A memory tried to surface. Smoke. Sirens. A voice laughing through a radio. He pushed it back down before it reached the surface. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. The clerk carefully boxed the finished decorations that had already been prepared for Eli's cake. How's it getting there? He asked. Darius thought for a moment. I know someone. He pulled out his phone and scrolled until he found an old number he hadn't called in months. Captain Ben Alvarez. Station 14. His thumb hovered over the screen. Maya noticed. You know firefighters? A few. You never told me that. There are a lot of things I haven't told you. The call connected on the third ring. Well, I'll be... A warm voice answered. Darius Cole. That's a name I haven't seen in a long time. Hey, Ben. What made you remember we're still alive? Darius looked at the fire truck cake waiting behind the glass. I need a favor. For you. For a little boy. There was a brief silence before Ben chuckled. You always did know how to ask. When the call ended, the rain outside had become steadier. The bakery lights reflected across the wet sidewalk like ribbons of gold. As Darius picked up Maya's birthday cake with one hand, the other rested for a moment on the counter beside Eli's untouched one. He had no idea who Lauren Hayes really was. He didn't know why Lakeview Management kept calling. He didn't know why a mother would give up her son's birthday instead of asking for help. He only knew one thing. Tomorrow, an 8-year-old boy was going to believe that someone remembered him. The next morning arrived wrapped in gray clouds and the smell of wet pavement. Before sunrise, Darius parked outside Fire Station 14 with 2 cake boxes balanced carefully on the passenger seat. Maya sat beside him, hugging her backpack while the silver rescue whistle rested against her jacket. The bay doors rolled open. A tall firefighter with silver at his temples walked toward the truck, smiling before Darius even stepped out. I wondered if you'd really come, Captain Ben Alvarez said. It's been a while. 3 years. Ben's smile softened. Too long? He noticed Maya and tipped an imaginary hat. You must be Maya. She nodded shyly. Dad says you know how to drive the biggest trucks. Ben laughed. Only when nobody else wants the job. The laughter faded as his eyes settled briefly on the whistle around Maya's neck. He recognized it immediately. Neither man mentioned its owner. Darius opened the second cake box. The bright red fire truck looked even better than it had behind the bakery glass. White frosting ladders climbed the sides, and tiny blue lights had been piped around the windows. Across the top, in careful icing, were the words, "Happy 8th birthday, Eli." Ben looked up. So who's the lucky kid? A boy whose mother had to cancel it. Money? I don't think that's the whole story. Ben didn't ask another question. He had known Darius long enough to understand that when he spoke this little, something had already settled deep inside him. Maya reached into her backpack and handed Ben the folded card. "Can you make sure he gets this too?" Ben opened it carefully. "Every little hero deserves a birthday." He smiled. "I think someone around here can deliver that." An hour later, a red fire engine rolled slowly into the parking lot outside a modest brick apartment building at Lakeview Housing Cooperative. Children gathering for school stopped to stare. Curtains moved. Neighbors peeked through windows. Lauren Hayes froze halfway down the sidewalk with Eli's backpack hanging from one shoulder. For one terrifying second, she thought something terrible had happened. Then Captain Alvarez stepped down carrying the cake. "Morning," he said warmly. "Eli Hayes?" The little boy's eyes grew wide. "That's me. We heard there's a birthday hero living here." Lauren's lips parted. She looked from the firefighters to the cake, then to the familiar handwriting on the small card taped beside it. Her hands began to shake. I canceled this." Ben simply smiled. "Looks like somebody thought birthdays are worth keeping." Eli laughed so loudly that several neighbors turned toward him. "Mom, they brought a fire truck cake." He wrapped both arms around Lauren without noticing the tears already slipping down her cheeks. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. Instead, she pressed one hand over her mouth while the other rested gently on the edge of the cake box. For the first time in weeks, Eli wasn't watching her worried face. He was staring at the firefighters with complete wonder. Lauren quietly wiped her eyes before he could notice. "Can you tell me who sent this?" Captain Alvarez shook his head. "He asked us not to. He only said one thing." Lauren waited. "He said an 8-year-old shouldn't remember his birthday as the day his mother had to give something up." Lauren closed her eyes. Whoever that stranger was, somehow he had seen straight through the lie she had told inside the bakery. As the fire engine slowly pulled away, Eli waved until it disappeared around the corner. Lauren remained standing in the parking lot with the cake in her arms. Her phone vibrated again. Victor Dane. She stared at the name. Then she looked back at the birthday cake. For the first time in days, she answered the call. "Ms. Hayes," Victor's cold voice said, "we need to discuss your reports about Lakeview." Lauren's smile disappeared. She looked toward the apartment buildings surrounding her. Something told her this conversation had nothing to do with birthday cakes anymore. "Ms. Hayes," Victor Dane repeated, his voice clipped and impatient. "I expect you in my office in 20 minutes. Lauren tightened her grip on the cake box. "I'm with my son." "Then find someone to watch him." The line went dead. For a long moment, she simply stood there while Eli admired every tiny detail piped onto the frosting. "Mom, look," he said, pointing at the little ladder made of white icing. "It's just like the real truck." Lauren forced a smile. "It sure is." She swallowed the lump in her throat. Whoever had paid for this cake hadn't just bought dessert. They had given her one more morning where Eli could feel like every other child. She silently promised herself she would find that stranger someday. By 9 o'clock, Eli was safely inside Franklin Elementary. Lauren watched him disappear through the front doors, carrying 2 cupcakes for his classmates, carefully packed beside the birthday cake that would wait for the evening. Only after the school bell rang did she drive toward the Lakeview Housing Cooperative offices. The brick buildings looked ordinary from the outside. Fresh landscaping, new signs, children's bicycles leaning against stair rails. It was exactly the kind of neighborhood brochures described as safe, affordable family living. Lauren knew better. Inside Building C, Apartment 214 still had a smoke detector hanging loose from exposed wires. Building F had 2 emergency lights that hadn't worked in nearly 4 months. And the east stairwell in Building A still had an exit door that refused to latch correctly after every repair request. Residents saw isolated problems. Lauren saw a pattern. She had documented every complaint, every maintenance request, every unanswered email, every inspection that had somehow been postponed. She carried copies in a blue folder tucked beneath her arm. Victor Dane was already waiting. His office overlooked the courtyard where children usually played after school. He didn't offer her a seat. "I heard you contacted the city again. I submitted another maintenance report. I told you those issues are being handled. They aren't." Victor folded his hands. "The buyers are conducting their final review next month." Lauren's stomach tightened. So that's what this is really about. If inspectors start wandering through occupied buildings now, the entire transaction could collapse. What transaction? He ignored the question. "You've worked here 6 years. I have. You've built trust with these families." "Exactly. So stop frightening them." Lauren opened the blue folder. Apartment 214 reported another detector failure. Victor didn't even look. Building F still has emergency lighting problems. Silence. "And yesterday, Mrs. Ramirez found the rear exit chained during a delivery." Victor finally leaned forward. "Enough." His voice remained calm, almost gentle. "You are a housing coordinator." "Yes." "Not a fire inspector." "No." "So stop acting like one." Lauren met his eyes. "I'm acting like someone responsible for families, for tenants, for children." Victor slid an envelope across the desk. Inside was a revised employment agreement. Her weekly hours had been reduced. The performance bonus she had counted on was gone. A note at the bottom read, "Employee housing eligibility subject to review." Lauren stared at the final sentence. "If my hours are cut, you may no longer qualify for your apartment." "My son lives there." Victor shrugged. "Then I suggest you focus on doing the job you're actually paid to do." She slowly closed the folder. "This isn't about budgets." "No? You want me to stop documenting safety problems?" Victor smiled for the first time. "I want you to become a team player." Lauren stood. "I can't." "You mean you won't?" "I won't." She walked toward the door. Behind her, Victor spoke one last sentence. "Think carefully, Ms. Hayes." She stopped but didn't turn around. People who refuse to cooperate usually discover how expensive principals can become. Lauren left without answering. Outside, she leaned against the brick wall, trying to steady her breathing. Her phone buzzed. A picture message appeared from Franklin Elementary. It showed Eli standing beside his classmates, smiling proudly in front of the bright red fire truck cake. The caption from his teacher read, "Best birthday smile we've seen all year." Thank you for making today special. Lauren stared at the photo until her vision blurred again. Then she looked up at the rows of apartment buildings surrounding her. Somewhere inside them were hundreds of families who trusted the alarms over their children's beds to work if the worst night of their lives ever came. She slipped the phone back into her pocket. For Eli, for every child living at Lakeview. She wasn't going to stop writing those reports, even if it cost her everything. The following afternoon, Darius parked his white service van behind Franklin Elementary, where children were spilling onto the playground beneath a bright autumn sky. The laughter outside stood in sharp contrast to the quiet concentration inside the school's mechanical room. He knelt before the fire alarm control panel, removing its metal cover with practiced hands. A custodian leaned against the doorway. Anything serious? Darius studied the display for barely 2 seconds. Not serious yet. You figured that out already? He pointed with his flashlight. See this trouble code? The panel says detector 18 failed, but the voltage is too steady. A failed detector doesn't leave a signature like that. The custodian frowned. So what's wrong? Someone replaced part of the circuit with a resistor. You can tell that just from the numbers? Darius smiled faintly. The system always tells the truth. You just have to know how to listen. He reached into his worn canvas bag and pulled out a weathered notebook. Every page was filled with tiny handwriting, serial numbers, sketches of wiring layouts, and dates stretching back years. The custodian shook his head. I've never seen anybody keep records like that. They've saved me more than once. He wrote down the panel number, the code, and the exact voltage before replacing the faulty component. The warning light disappeared. So, the custodian said, another problem solved. For today. As Darius closed the panel, children burst through the hallway after the final bell. Their voices echoed through the building. A small pair of sneakers stopped beside him. Dad! Maya rushed over, wrapping her arms around him. Guess what? Mrs. Porter read my story to the whole class. I knew she would. And? She lowered her voice dramatically. I got an A. He laughed. I never doubted it. She noticed the notebook sticking out of his tool bag. You're writing in it again. I always do. Even for tiny problems. Especially the tiny ones. She tilted her head. Why? Because little things become big things when nobody pays attention. Maya considered that answer while absent-mindedly spinning the silver rescue whistle around one finger. The whistle caught the afternoon sunlight. For a heartbeat, Darius stopped smiling. A distant memory flashed through his mind. A warehouse filled with smoke, a radio crackling, Marcus Bell laughing. Write everything down, Darius. Someday the details will matter. The memory vanished as quickly as it had come. You okay? Maya asked. I'm fine. She wasn't convinced. Dad. Grandma asked about the whistle again this morning. He zipped the notebook into his bag. What did you tell her? That you weren't ready. He looked at his daughter with quiet surprise. And were you right? I think so. Before he could answer, his phone vibrated. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Instead, he answered. This is Darius. A woman's voice came through, hesitant but steady. Mr. Cole? Yes. My name is Lauren Hayes. His expression changed. I finally found you. There was a brief silence. I wanted to thank you. You don't have to. I do. You already have. No, she said softly. You don't understand. He heard children playing in the background on her end of the call. Eli hasn't stopped talking about those firefighters. A smile crossed Darius's face. I'm glad. I also need to ask you something. He didn't respond. I know you work on fire alarm systems. His grip tightened almost imperceptibly around the phone. Who told you that? The principal at Franklin Elementary. Another pause. There are strange failures happening where I live. Darius looked across the parking lot toward Maya, who was helping another little girl zip her backpack. What kind of failures? Smoke detectors. He remained silent. Emergency lights. His eyes narrowed. Exit doors. The smile disappeared completely. I think, Lauren continued carefully, someone doesn't want those problems to be found. Darius closed his eyes for a moment. The old instincts he had buried years ago stirred beneath the surface. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. I'm sorry. Lauren waited. I can't help. Before she could say another word, he ended the call. Maya walked over just in time to see him slip the phone back into his pocket. Who was that? He looked toward the school building instead of answering. Someone was asking him to walk back toward the life he had promised never to return to. And for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't certain he could keep that promise. That evening, the small duplex on Cleveland's east side felt quieter than usual. The scent of chicken soup drifted from the kitchen, while Evelyn Cole slowly folded clean towels at the dining room table. Arthritis had stiffened her hands, but she refused to let Darius do everything for her. You've been somewhere else all night, she said without looking up. Darius rinsed a coffee mug and stared out the window. I'm just tired. No. She smiled gently. You're troubled. Before he could answer, Maya came running downstairs with her homework tucked under one arm. Dad, can you quiz me on my spelling words? He smiled, grateful for the interruption. Of course. For the next 20 minutes, the house filled with ordinary sounds, laughter, misspelled words, the scrape of pencils across paper. For a little while, the phone call from Lauren faded into the background. When Maya finally disappeared upstairs to brush her teeth, Evelyn spoke again. Who called? He dried the mug slowly. A woman? The mother? He looked up. You knew. I've lived with you your whole life. She smiled knowingly. You don't buy birthday cakes for strangers every week. Darius sat across from her. She wants me to inspect her apartment complex. And? I said no. Evelyn nodded, but her expression didn't change. Did you mean it? He didn't answer. She noticed the silence. I remember another young man who always came home saying he wasn't getting involved. A faint laugh escaped her. He never fooled anyone either. Darius looked toward the staircase where Maya's bedroom light glowed beneath the door. I made a promise. I know. I told Maya I'd never go back. You promised not to chase investigations. I promised to keep her away from that world. Evelyn folded the last towel. There's a difference. Before Darius could respond, Maya walked back into the room. She held the silver rescue whistle in her hand. Grandma says this belonged to someone brave. Evelyn looked toward her son instead of answering. Maya continued. Was he your friend? Darius accepted the whistle carefully. His thumb brushed across the tiny scratches worn into the silver surface. Yes. What was his name? For several seconds, only the ticking kitchen clock filled the room. Marcus. Is he the firefighter? He was. What happened? Darius swallowed. He helped people. And he didn't make it home one night. Maya stepped closer. I'm sorry. He wrapped his fingers around the whistle. So am I. The room fell silent again. Finally, Maya reached up and hugged him without saying another word. It was enough. Across town, Lauren sat alone in the leasing office at Lakeview. The building had emptied hours earlier, but the fluorescent lights above her desk still burned. Her blue folder lay open. Maintenance requests, resident complaints, photographs, one report after another. She spread them across the desk. Apartment 214, Building F, East Stairwell, smoke detector failures, emergency lighting outages, blocked exits. Every report carried the same handwritten note in the margin. Pending. She rubbed her tired eyes. Someone knocked softly on the office door. It was Mr. Henderson from Building B. The retired bus driver removed his cap. Miss Hayes? I'm sorry, we're closed. I know. He hesitated. My smoke alarm chirped again. I'll submit another work order first thing tomorrow. They've replaced the batteries 3 times. Lauren frowned. They have? He nodded. It keeps happening. She wrote another note. As Mr. Henderson turned to leave, he stopped. I heard you stood up to management. She looked up. I don't know how much longer I'll be here. The old man smiled sadly. I hope you stay. Why? Because you're the only one who listens. After he left, Lauren stared at the growing stack of complaints. She picked up her phone. Darius's number remained on the screen. Her thumb hovered over it. She knew he had already said no. But she also knew something else. The way he had recognized those alarm failures over the phone. No ordinary technician could have understood them so quickly. She whispered to the empty office. What happened to you? Outside, rain began tapping softly against the windows. Far above the leasing office, dozens of families settled in for another ordinary night, trusting alarms they had never questioned. Lauren looked at the reports one last time before locking them inside her desk. Somewhere in those pages was a truth that somebody wanted buried. And somehow, the quiet father who had bought a birthday cake seemed to be the only person who knew where to begin looking. The next morning, Lauren arrived at Franklin Elementary earlier than usual. Parents hurried children toward the front entrance while buses unloaded another wave of sleepy students. She wasn't there because of Eli. She was waiting for Darius. She spotted the familiar white service van pulling into the maintenance lot just after 7:30. Darius climbed out carrying his tool bag and the worn notebook that never seemed to leave his side. Before he reached the building, Lauren stepped into his path. I'm sorry for showing up like this. He wasn't surprised. I figured you might. I won't take much of your time. The school's opening in 10 minutes. I know. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Children streamed around them laughing, chasing one another across the sidewalk. Lauren finally broke the silence. My son ate birthday cake because of you. You don't owe me anything. I'm not here to pay you back. She took a slow breath. I'm here because something happened yesterday. Darius waited. Another smoke detector failed. He remained expressionless. They replaced it. Still nothing. It failed again 6 hours later. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. They said it was defective. And you don't believe them. No. She reached into her shoulder bag and removed a photograph. This is the detector. Darius glanced at the image for less than 2 seconds. Who took it? I did. You touched it? No. Good. He handed the picture back immediately. You noticed something. I noticed enough. Lauren's heartbeat quickened. What? He looked toward the school entrance where Maya was walking inside with several classmates. Only after she disappeared into the building did he answer. The detector isn't broken. You can tell from a picture. The mounting screws are new. Lauren blinked. And? The detector isn't. She stared at him. If maintenance replaced the unit yesterday, those screws should show the same age. He pointed to the corner of the photograph. They don't. Lauren looked again. She never would have noticed. The detector was never replaced. It was removed. His voice stayed calm. Then someone put the same one back. A chill ran through her. Why would anyone do that? I don't know. You really saw all of that from one picture? Darius didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the school doors. I have work to do. She followed beside him. Please. He stopped. I can't. You haven't even seen the buildings. I don't need to. But I already know enough. Lauren frowned. What does that mean? He looked directly at her for the first time. It means somebody wants those alarms to appear repaired without actually repairing them. The words landed with frightening certainty. Then help me prove it. No. People could get hurt. I know. Then why won't you come? His jaw tightened. Because once I step into that place. He looked away before finishing the sentence. I'm not just fixing alarms anymore. The school principal opened the front doors. Darius, we're ready whenever you are. I'll be right there. Lauren watched him start walking away. She couldn't let him leave. Mr. Cole. He paused without turning around. Who taught you to see things like this? For several seconds, the only sound between them was the distant laughter of children on the playground. Finally, he answered. Someone who isn't here anymore. Then he disappeared inside this building. Lauren stood alone on the sidewalk, holding the photograph. She flipped it over. On the back, she noticed something she hadn't paid attention to before. Darius had written 3 words in neat block letters. Check the resistor. Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. Just 3 words. Lauren stared at them, confused. She had no idea what a resistor looked like, but she knew exactly who might. She climbed into her car and drove straight back toward Lakeview. For the first time, she wasn't searching for someone to rescue her. She was searching for a tiny piece of evidence hidden inside a smoke detector. And without realizing it, Darius had already pointed her toward the truth. Lauren drove straight back to Lakeview with the photograph resting on the passenger seat. Every red light felt longer than the last. She kept hearing Darius's calm voice in her head. Check the resistor. She didn't know what a resistor looked like, but she knew exactly where the detector had been installed. Apartment 214. Mrs. Ramirez answered the door with a tired smile. Back again? I'm sorry, Lauren said. Would you mind if I looked at the smoke detector one more time? The older woman stepped aside. If it'll finally make the chirping stop, be my guest. Lauren climbed onto a kitchen chair and carefully removed the detector from its mounting plate. Remembering Darius's warning, she didn't pry anything apart. She simply looked. The plastic casing showed fresh fingerprints. The mounting screws gleamed like new pennies. The detector itself was faded, yellowed by years of cooking grease and sunlight. She took another photograph, then another. Only after lowering the detector did she notice something else. The inspection sticker had been peeled away and replaced with another one that wasn't perfectly straight. Her pulse quickened. Someone hadn't repaired the unit. Someone had tried to make it look repaired. Across the courtyard, Victor Dane's black SUV rolled into the parking lot. Lauren instinctively slipped the detector back into place before he entered the building. A few minutes later, he appeared outside apartment 214 with the maintenance supervisor. "I thought I made myself clear yesterday," Victor said. "I was checking on a resident. You were conducting another inspection. I was doing my job." He smiled politely, but there wasn't an ounce of warmth behind it. "No, Ms. Hayes." He stepped closer. "Your job is resident relations." He tapped the detector with one finger. "This is maintenance. The residents keep reporting failures, and maintenance keeps closing the tickets without fixing them." Victor's expression hardened. "Careful. I'm only stating facts." "No." His voice dropped. "You're creating liability." Lauren looked around the hallway. Several apartment doors had opened just enough for curious neighbors to watch. Mr. Henderson stood quietly at the far end of the corridor. A young mother held her toddler against her shoulder. Victor noticed them too. He straightened his tie and raised his voice just enough for everyone to hear. "Lakeview remains fully compliant with every required safety standard." No one answered. The silence hanging in the hallway said far more than any argument could. Victor turned back toward Lauren. "My office. 10 minutes." Without waiting for a reply, he walked away. That afternoon, Darius finished replacing an emergency pull station at another elementary school across town. As he packed his tools, his supervisor approached with a clipboard. "Nice work." "Thanks. You've got another service request." Darius glanced at the address. Lakeview Housing Cooperative. His hand froze. "I didn't request that assignment. The call came through dispatch. I can't take it." His supervisor looked confused. "It's just an alarm inspection. I'm booked the rest of the week." "You aren't." The older man checked the schedule. "In fact, tomorrow's completely open." Darius stared at the work order. Building A smoke detector complaints. Exit door inspection. His chest tightened. The city had assigned the job without knowing Lauren had already contacted him. Or maybe it wasn't a coincidence at all. His phone vibrated before he could think any further. A text from Maya. "Grandma's therapy went well today. She said to tell you not to worry so much. Love you." He smiled despite himself. Then he looked back at the work order. 3 years ago, he had walked away from investigations to keep promises that mattered more than any career. Now, the very kind of place he had sworn to avoid was sitting on the passenger seat of his van. He folded the assignment and slipped it into his notebook. For the first time since Marcus died, fate wasn't asking him to choose between his past and his future. It was placing both of them at the same address. The next afternoon, Darius parked outside Lakeview Housing Cooperative 15 minutes before his scheduled inspection. He didn't get out. The work order rested on the steering wheel while families came and went through the complex, as if it were any ordinary Thursday. A father unloaded groceries. 2 nurses in blue scrubs hurried toward Building C after finishing the night shift. Children chased a basketball across the courtyard. Normal. That was what troubled him the most. Danger almost never announced itself. It waited until people believed everything was fine. His phone chimed. Maintenance dispatch, annual fire alarm inspection, Building A. Nothing about the request mentioned resident complaints. Nothing mentioned blocked exits. Nothing mentioned Lauren Hayes. Darius exhaled slowly before stepping out of the van. Inside Building A, the maintenance supervisor greeted him with an easy smile. "Good to see you. Shouldn't take long." We'll see. We already fixed the detector issue. So I heard. The supervisor unlocked the electrical room. The fire alarm control panel glowed green. Every zone reported normal. Darius crouched in front of it without touching a single button. He simply watched. 20 seconds passed. 30. Then he reached into his tool bag and connected a handheld analyzer to the diagnostic port. The supervisor frowned. You don't trust the panel? I trust what it records. Lines of data scrolled across the small screen. Darius read them in silence. Then he asked, Who serviced this system yesterday? The man hesitated. One of our contractors. Name? I'd have to check. You should. His tone remained calm, but something in it caused the supervisor to stop smiling. What is it? Darius tapped the screen. So the panel says detector A17 failed yesterday at 2:14 p.m. Right. It also says the detector came back online exactly 43 seconds later. So replacing a detector takes several minutes. The supervisor blinked. What are you saying? I'm saying nobody replaced anything. He disconnected the analyzer and walked toward the hallway. Apartment by apartment, he examined every smoke detector without removing a single one. His eyes weren't on the plastic housings. They were on the screws, the paint, the dust patterns, tiny details no one else would have noticed. Halfway down the corridor, he stopped in front of apartment 214. Mrs. Ramirez opened this door before he could knock. Oh, thank goodness. She recognized him from the school where her granddaughter studied. You actually came. Darius smiled politely. I'm just here for the inspection. She lowered her voice. The alarm chirped again last night. May I? She stepped aside. He climbed a small step stool and examined the detector Lauren had photographed. Everything matched. New screws, old housing, crooked inspection sticker. His jaw tightened. Then he noticed something else. Barely visible beneath the edge of the mounting plate was a tiny burn mark no larger than a grain of rice. His expression changed instantly. He carefully lowered the detector. Did anyone smell something electrical? Mrs. Ramirez nodded. My grandson said it smelled like hot plastic. When? 2 nights ago. Darius looked toward the hallway. The maintenance supervisor was watching from several doors away. Without a word, Darius took out his notebook and wrote 3 short lines. Apartment 214, heat damage, possible bypass. He tore the page free and slipped it into his pocket instead of leaving it in the notebook. For the first time all afternoon, he didn't want anyone else reading his notes. As he continued down the hall, Lauren appeared at the far end of the corridor. She hadn't expected to see him. You came. I didn't come for you. I know. She noticed the seriousness on his face. What did you find? Before he could answer, a loud metallic slam echoed through the building. Both of them turned. At the end of the hallway, a young mother struggled to pull open the emergency exit door. It didn't move. She pulled again. Nothing. Darius reached the door in 3 long strides. He grabbed the panic bar and pushed hard. The door remained shut. His eyes dropped to the narrow gap between the frame and the wall. Something gleamed inside. A steel chain. Someone had secured the emergency exit from the outside. The hallway fell completely silent. Darius slowly turned toward Lauren. This wasn't poor maintenance anymore. Someone had made a deliberate choice. And for the first time since arriving at Lakeview, he realized he wasn't looking at neglected equipment. He was looking at evidence. Darius crouched beside the emergency exit, running his fingertips along the narrow gap between the steel door and its frame. He didn't pull. He didn't force it. He simply listened. The faint, metallic rattle told him everything he needed to know. "There shouldn't be anything behind this door," he said quietly. Lauren stepped beside him. "What is it?" "A chain." The maintenance supervisor hurried over. "That's impossible." "Is it?" The man shoved against the panic bar with both hands. The door refused to move. A young mother, still holding her toddler, shifted nervously. What if there'd been a real fire? No one answered. Several apartment doors opened farther. Residents began gathering in the hallway, whispering among themselves. Darius finally spoke. "Everyone, please stay calm." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the quiet authority of someone who had spent years speaking during emergencies. "There is no immediate danger right now." The hallway settled. He turned back to the supervisor. "I need access to the outside of this exit." The man hesitated. I don't have that key." Lauren looked at him in disbelief. "You manage this building." "I only have the interior keys." Darius's eyes narrowed. "Who has the exterior access?" The supervisor swallowed. "Regional management." Before anyone could say another's word, Victor Dane appeared at the end of the corridor, his polished shoes clicking against the tile floor. He took in the crowd with a single glance. "What's going on?" Lauren folded her arms. "The emergency exit is chained." Victor didn't even look at the door. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." Darius stood. "There isn't." Victor's attention shifted toward him. "And you are?" "The contractor assigned to today's inspection." Victor offered a practiced smile. "Then perform your inspection." "I am." "This hallway doesn't need an audience." The gathered residents exchanged uneasy looks. Mr. Henderson finally spoke. "My wife uses a walker." He pointed toward the blocked exit. "If that door doesn't open—" Victor interrupted smoothly. "It will be corrected." "When?" "As soon as maintenance verifies the issue." Darius looked directly at him. "It doesn't need verification." The smile faded from Victor's face. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything." Darius gestured toward the door. "I'm stating a fact." Victor stepped closer. "You've been here less than an hour." "Long enough." "To accuse this property of violating safety regulations?" "No." Darius's voice remained perfectly even. "Long enough to recognize that this door cannot serve its intended purpose." The hallway fell silent again. Victor studied him carefully. Most contractors became nervous under pressure. This one didn't. "What company do you work for?" Darius gave the name of the municipal fire systems contractor. Victor nodded once. "I'll be contacting your supervisor." "You're welcome to." Something about that answer unsettled him. There was no defensiveness, no hesitation, only quiet certainty. Victor looked toward the maintenance supervisor. "Remove the chain." I can't." "Why not?" "It's locked from the outside." Victor's jaw tightened for the first time. Lauren noticed. So did Darius. It lasted less than a second. But it was enough. He opened his notebook and calmly wrote one line. "Regional manager aware before inspection completed." He closed the notebook before anyone could read it. Victor watched the movement. "You take a lot of notes." "I do." "Why?" Darius slipped the notebook back into his bag. "Details disappear." Victor smiled again. "Sometimes they should." For the first time since they had met, Darius looked him straight in the eye. Not the important ones. Neither man spoke after that. The standoff ended only when a maintenance truck pulled around the side of the building. 2 workers hurried toward the exterior exit. Within minutes, the chain disappeared. The panic bar finally released with a sharp, metallic click. Several residents sighed with relief. Victor turned toward the crowd. There. He spread his hands. Problem solved. Most people slowly drifted back into their apartments. Only Lauren remained. She looked at the now open doorway, then back at Darius. They fixed it too quickly. He nodded once. They knew exactly what to remove. She lowered her voice. So this wasn't an accident? No. What does that mean? Darius stared through the open exit toward the parking lot beyond. It means someone expected nobody would ever try that door. A cold breeze swept through the hallway. For everyone else, it felt like fresh air. For Darius, it felt like the first page of a much larger investigation reopening itself. He drove home with the radio turned off. The notebook rested on the passenger seat, unopened. For years, it had been nothing more than a record of faulty wiring, worn sensors, and routine inspections. Now it contained something different. A chained emergency exit, fresh screws on old detectors, a regional manager who already knew what would be found before anyone finished looking. Darius gripped the steering wheel tighter. When he reached the duplex, Maya was sitting on the front porch helping Evelyn water the flower boxes beneath the windows. The evening sun painted the old brick building in warm gold. "You made it," Maya called. "I did." She ran down the steps and wrapped her arms around him. "Grandma beat me at checkers again." Evelyn smiled from her chair. "She still thinks I'm letting her win." "I know you are." Maya laughed. For a few precious minutes, the worries at Lakeview faded behind ordinary family life. Darius carried the watering can back to the porch, while Maya proudly showed him a drawing from school. It was a fire engine surrounded by smiling children. At the corner of the page, she had carefully sketched the same silver whistle she carried every day. "I drew yours too." Darius looked at it quietly. You remembered every scratch. "I always do," she smiled. "You told me little details matter." His heart tightened. So I did. After dinner, while Maya finished her homework upstairs, Evelyn poured 2 cups of coffee. "You went?" Darius nodded. "I had to. The city assigned the inspection." "And?" He laid the notebook on the table. Without saying a word, he opened it to the newest page. Evelyn read each line slowly. Detector replaced. Actually reused. Possible circuit bypass. Emergency exit chained from exterior. She looked back up. This wasn't negligence. No. It was intentional. I believe so. She was silent for a long moment. "I've seen that look before." "What look?" "The one you wore every time Marcus called." Darius stared into his coffee. "I told Lauren I wouldn't get involved." "But you already are." "I only inspected what was assigned." Evelyn gently closed the notebook. "Your feet may have walked in because of work." She placed one hand over the cover. "But your conscience walked in for another reason." Before he could answer, the lights flickered. Once, then again. The entire neighborhood briefly fell into darkness before electricity returned. Maya hurried downstairs. "Did we lose power?" "Only for a second," Darius said. She looked out the front window. "Mr. Turner's porch light is still off." Darius stepped outside. Several houses remained dark while others had already come back. His eyes drifted almost automatically toward the utility pole across the street. A transformer had tripped. Nothing unusual. Still, he noticed himself studying the neighborhood exactly the way he had studied Lakeview, looking for patterns, looking for details, looking for answers. He quietly shook his head. Old habits were returning far too easily. Across town, Lauren unlocked the leasing office after hours. She had told herself she only wanted to organize paperwork. Instead, she spread every maintenance file across the conference table. One report caught her attention. Apartment 214, completed. Technician notes. Detector replaced. Functional test passed. She opened another file. Building F completed. The wording was identical, another and another. Every report used precisely the same sentence. Even the punctuation matched. Lauren frowned. No technician wrote exactly the same way every single time. She compared the signatures, different names, different dates. The handwriting looked different. But the comments, they were copies. She reached for her laptop and began searching through older records. 2 years. 3 years. The same sentence appeared again and again, as if someone had been duplicating reports instead of performing inspections. A chill ran through her. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She answered. Ms. Hayes? Yes? This is Captain Ben Alvarez from Fire Station 14. Lauren straightened in her chair. I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. I just wanted to check whether Eli enjoyed his birthday. A small smile appeared despite everything. He'll be talking about that cake for years. I'm glad. There was a brief pause. Then Ben spoke more carefully. If you happen to see Darius again. Lauren listened. Tell him some promises deserve to be broken. Before she could ask what he meant, the call ended. She looked around the empty office, then down at the stack of copied inspection reports covering the table. Somewhere between a birthday cake, an old firefighter's whistle, and a quiet maintenance technician. Pieces of a story were beginning to fit together. She just didn't know yet how dangerous the finished picture would become. Rain returned just after midnight. A slow, steady drizzle tapped against the windows of Lakeview while most of the residents slept. Lauren was still in the leasing office, surrounded by maintenance files, when her phone shattered the silence. It was Mrs. Ramirez. Lauren, something's wrong. Lauren was already grabbing her keys. What happened? The fire alarm started for a few seconds, then stopped. Is there smoke? I don't think so. I'll be right there. By the time Lauren reached Building A, several apartment doors had opened. Parents stood in the hallway wearing slippers and robes, children clinging to their hands. What happened? Someone asked. I don't know yet, Lauren answered honestly. She looked toward the fire alarm panel mounted beside the entrance. Every light was green. No active alarm. No trouble signal. Nothing. Yet dozens of people had heard the siren only moments earlier. She frowned. A false alarm was one thing. An alarm that erased its own history was something else. Her phone was already in her hand before she realized who she was calling. Darius answered on the second ring. Lauren? I'm sorry. He immediately heard the panic in her voice. What happened? The alarm sounded. Is there a fire? No. It stopped by itself. Darius was already pulling on his boots. Did everyone evacuate? Only a few people. What does the panel show now? Nothing. His voice became noticeably sharper. Nothing? It's completely normal. Don't reset anything. I haven't touched it. Good. He looked toward the hallway outside Maya's bedroom. She was still asleep, so was Evelyn. He closed his eyes. This was exactly the kind of call he had promised himself he would never answer again. But if a fire panel had erased its own alarm history, someone had altered far more than a smoke detector. I'll be there. Lauren hesitated. I thought you said you couldn't help. I know what I said. He hung up before she could reply. 25 minutes later, Darius's white service van rolled quietly into Lakeview. Lauren was waiting outside Building A. You came. I came because alarms don't erase themselves. He unlocked the control panel with the municipal service key clipped inside his tool bag. The display still showed normal. He connected his analyzer. Nothing. Then he frowned. The event log. What about it? It's missing. Lauren blinked. What do you mean? This panel stores every alarm. He scrolled through the memory. Every test. Another page. Every power interruption. Another. Every service visit. Then, the record jumped from 6 weeks ago to this morning. Everything in between had vanished. Lauren stared at the screen. Can data just disappear? No. Then where did it go? Darius slowly disconnected the analyzer. It was deleted. A voice echoed from behind them. Working late? Victor Dane stood in the lobby holding an umbrella, looking as composed as ever. I heard residents were concerned. Lauren folded her arms. The alarm activated. So I was told. It isn't in the log anymore. Victor glanced casually toward the panel. I'm sure that's a software issue. Darius finally spoke. No. Victor looked at him. The software doesn't choose which 6 weeks to forget. Silence filled the lobby. Several residents had quietly gathered behind Lauren. They weren't speaking. They were listening. Victor smiled politely. I appreciate your professionalism. He turned toward Lauren. Please reassure everyone the building is perfectly safe. No one moved. Darius looked at the blank section of the event log one last time before closing the panel. His reflection stared back at him in the dark screen. He had seen missing records before, years ago, on another investigation. The memory hit him without warning. Marcus standing beside him inside a smoke-blackened warehouse. His friend's voice echoed through his mind. When evidence disappears, Darius, that's when the real investigation begins. He hadn't thought about those words in years. Now they returned with frightening clarity. He looked at Victor, then at the frightened families gathered in the hallway. This was no longer about a faulty detector. It wasn't even about Lakeview. Someone had started erasing evidence, and someone else had become very interested in making sure no one ever noticed. But in the end, the moment that stayed with me wasn't the missing records. It was Darius quietly paying for Eli's birthday cake, never expecting anyone to know his name, because he refused to let one little boy believe he had been forgotten. This story reminds us that the strongest actions are often the quietest ones. Darius didn't change lives with speeches. He changed them by choosing to do the right thing when no one was watching. Today, take one small step for someone who may be carrying a burden you can't see. It doesn't have to be expensive or dramatic. Sometimes all it takes is noticing someone the way Darius noticed Lauren. If this story touched your heart, leave a 1 in the comments so I know it reached you. And tell me, have you ever done something kind for a stranger without expecting them to know it was you? I'd love to read your story below. Stay with me, because the next story begins with another ordinary moment that changes someone's life forever.